Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Premiership Quarter. Today, I'm going to be doing my around 20 AFL tips and predictions for the AFL season, going through every game, talking a little bit about where I think the game might be won and lost, as well as where I think the teams might gain an advantage over the other, including some positional matchups or ins and outs from the game with things like injury, as there has been a few this week. Before we get into the video, if you wouldn't mind, please hitting the like button and subscribing to my channel. It really help grow my channel and push my videos in the YouTube algorithm. But with that being said, let's get straight into the video.
It came up behind him like a librarian. Jesus!
So on the Friday night, we have a kind of blockbuster, I'd call it, between Carlton and Port Adelaide. Very interesting game. Carlton coming on with a little bit of poor form, I think you could say. Over the last few weeks, they had lost to GWS Bulldogs and barely beaten North Melbourne in the last 3 weeks, so not fantastic form. And they're also losing Pitnet and Sam Durden, but they are able to regain a couple players. I believe Jack Martin and Mitch McGovern should be back for them, which is huge news because I think they're very important. But they're going to have to play it a little bit differently. They're going to have to be more stoppage focused and not have that transition game reliance like they've had with De Koning. There definitely is the change between Pitnet and De Koning with how they play, and it'll be very interesting to see how they go against Port Adelaide, who do like to move the ball very quickly, but also rely a fair bit on their stoppage work with the likes of Butters, Rosie, Horn Francis. You still got Wines, Willem Drew there. And I think it'll be very interesting, the battle between the two midfields. Cripps has obviously been in fantastic form, probably top two, top three Brownlow at the moment, definitely right at the top. And it'll be interesting to see how he goes against a very good Port Adelaide midfield. I don't know who Port Adelaide are missing this week, but it'll be interesting to see if they make any changes. I think against the Richmond, they were not great for the first 3 quarters, but still able to get a lead and then just sort of ballooned it out in the last quarter, as some good sides do, just get the win, similar to how Carlton did it against North Melbourne. I think there is a bit of cause for concern because I just don't trust Port Adelaide still. I don't think there's enough oomph with how they play, and I don't overly like that. And against Carlton at Marvel, I don't think it's going to be an easy game by any means. I think the Port Adelaide defense is probably going to be the biggest thing for Carlton to target. If they can get some good ball use going inside 50, which they have struggled with, then they can really challenge the Port Adelaide tools. And also the Port Adelaide Smalls haven't been very good this year in terms of being locked down. They've been more focused on getting the ball going forward and locking the ball inside their own forward 50. And so if the Carlton forward line can really get going, I don't think Harry Mackay should be missing, but they should still be able to get the win, and I do back them to win by 19 points. Next up is a very interesting game down at Blundstone Arena between North Melbourne and Geelong. The big weakness in Geelong that we have seen, especially in the last few weeks, has been that their midfield just isn't up to scratch at the moment. It's nowhere near a top 8 caliber midfield, and North Melbourne, in comparison, have one of the best youthful midfields in the league. They've got Sheasel, they've got Wardlaw, they've got LDU, they've still got Simkin, you've got Tom Power running through there. It's a fantastic mix. It works well together, and it has been the real boost for North Melbourne that they didn't have in the first half that has kept them in some games and helped them win in a couple others. So the big difference obviously will be how the midfields work. I think there's absolute upset potential here. They're not going to be heavily favoured by any means, North Melbourne, and not many people would tip them. But I think, honestly, that they will win. I still don't trust Geelong enough to be a lock for 8. I heard Nathan Buckley say that they're locked for him, but I don't fully believe them. They're still 6th and only one game ahead of the Bulldogs. And honestly, I think North Melbourne will win this game. I don't think it's going to be by a lot, but I think Griffin Logue's back. They've shown that they can play 3 tools in the forward line like they did against Carlton in Larkey, Comben, and Teakle. And I think now with Aiden Core being very good this year, they've got Griffin Logue back, as I just mentioned. I think it could be a very difficult game for Geelong after losing to the Bulldogs. And I actually have North Melbourne winning this game by 10 points in a good upset. Next up is the Q clash between Gold Coast and Brisbane. It's another interesting game, and there's going to be a lot of interesting games. You'll probably hear me saying that a couple more times, simply because of the congestion in the middle of the ballot, where basically every game will have some sort of bearing on the finals. That's not always happened, but it's going to be interesting now. Every game does have some bearing on it, and Gold Coast versus Brisbane is no exception. Gold Coast still mathematically a chance. They're definitely not favourites to make the eight, but Brisbane have now cemented themselves in the top four and have got 7 wins on the trot and just beat Sydney. But they're missing Harris Andrews. And yes, Ben King wasn't very good against GWS, had 3 behinds from 7 shots at goal. But I still think that Gold Coast at home is a very different side to what they are away. They showed that they can perform. They didn't really play very well. So they did play well. They just couldn't capitalize on a lot of their opportunities on a windy day against GWS. But there was a lot better fight in them. And I think Brisbane now, with a couple of injuries, a very weak back six, they might struggle against a Gold Coast team at home. And I actually think this could be a very interesting midfield battle as well. It's going to be a tough game for Brisbane after such a struggle against Sydney that maybe they just put so much effort into these 7 weeks to get them into the top four. Maybe it's a week drop off. And in another upset, I'm actually going to tip Gold Coast by 17 points. Now, I don't think it's going to be a balloons margin. Maybe it is by the end of the game, but I think it'll still be close. And then Gold Coast kick up a couple maybe in the last to sort of increase their lead a little bit. Another very interesting game, as I just mentioned, is St Kilda versus Essendon. St Kilda beat West Coast by 72 points, I believe, on the weekend, and Essendon lost against, who did they play? Essendon lost. Can't actually remember who they played. Let's see. Round 19. They lost to Adelaide on the Friday night. Their only 2 wins after the bye are against West Coast, which you have to win, and Collingwood, who have shown that they're nowhere near the same as they were last year. And so it's really important that they get this win. They don't have an easy fixture to close out the year. I think their last game is definitely against Brisbane, and that's up there, I believe, as well. So not going to be easy. So they've got St Kilda at Marvel, which is all right, not a bad game, but they have to get this win because next week it's Fremantle, a top four team, at the MCG as well. It's Gold Coast at home for Essendon, which is not easy, but it's definitely not the most simplest task. You've got Sydney, which I don't back them to win, even though it's at home, and then Brisbane, as I mentioned, away. So I don't say they're going to win their last 2 games. So to make finals, definitively they need to win these first 3. I wouldn't have them as favourites against Fremantle. So to get this win is huge for them. But it's against St Kilda, who aren't fantastic, but they could very well affect the finals in every game they play for the rest of the season. And they beat West Coast. They're in good form as well. They might get Paddy Dow back this week as a replacement for Liam Henry. But it's going to be super important for the Bombers to be able to slow the Saints' transition game. They also can't afford as many turnovers in the back half as they did against Adelaide because the Saints will pounce on it. I think St Kilda has every chance to win this game, and I think it's probably a bit closer than what a lot of people expect. However, I back Essendon's midfield to get it done over St Kilda's. I still don't trust St Kilda's midfield. Jack Steele's a good player. Jack Sinclair's been there a bit more this year, but I still don't think it's anywhere near as good enough as it can be, and they still don't have Mateus Philippou back. They haven't played Mitch Owens there. And so I think Essendon's midfield will get the job done in what's another close game between these two, and I think it'll be a 6-point game. Next up is Melbourne versus GWS, and the big talking point for me is Max Gawn going to be back? We have seen that it can work if it's horrible conditions for Melbourne to play without Max Gawn, but is it going to be horrible conditions? I don't know. And so against Fremantle, when it wasn't horrible conditions, you saw the impact that not having Max Gawn against 2 very solid ruckmen can have. And if he's back against a very good ruckman in Kieran Briggs, it's going to change this game for me. I think GWS should start favourites, and they are, I believe, on the market. They're about 2/3 of the percentage to win, about 68%, I think it was. And I think that they could definitely get this win. They're going to need some players to get back into their best form to really push back into the finals and definitively make it. Players like Tom Green, as I mentioned, Kieran Briggs, I still don't think he's hit the heights that he did in the back end of last season. Toby Green needs to really perform. But also, it's against Melbourne, and I don't like Melbourne's forward line. I still haven't for a little bit. And GWS, this can be the game where they can really lock down on Melbourne And I think Melbourne's midfield hasn't been great. Trent Rivers has been better, but I don't think the Clayton Oliver thing has worked out very well. He just hasn't been able to find the form. He's really struggled this year. And I think GWS probably win this game by, honestly, I think it could balloon out to 4 goals very, very easily. And that's why I've got the Giants winning. Next up is Fremantle versus West Coast, and Fremantle coming off a smacking of Melbourne for the second time in something like 8 weeks, which AFL fixturing, get better, please. It is not fantastic that many teams would have played each other twice, and St Kilda and Carlton, as just an example, only play each other for the first time in round 24, whilst two teams, I think Carlton and Geelong played within 6 weeks, and as I mentioned, Melbourne and Fremantle played within like 8 weeks twice. Get better, it's not great, and it needs to be a lot better for next season and needs to be better prepared for when the new team comes in. But bit of a sidetrack back to this game. So Fremantle, as I mentioned, coming off smacking Melbourne compared to West Coast coming off getting smacked by St Kilda. Pretty clear choice here. I think Fremantle's midfield should smack West Coast. Even without Alex Pearce, I think Fremantle are very heavily favoured, as they should be. Their forward line, Fremantle, has been very good. Josh Tracy's had a fantastic year. I think that probably pushed his case for an AA 44-man squad, to be honest. He's been very impressive, and I think he's a very good piece for the future, along with Amos as well. Their smalls have been getting the job done as well. Walters was very good on the weekend against Melbourne. I just don't see a world where West Coast win this. They got the upset earlier in the year, and I don't think they're going to be able to get another upset here. And I think it'll be about 7 goals for over 40 points for sure. That's why I've got it, let's say 44 points. Lovely number 44. Also, another smashing, I believe, in this game. Collingwood coming off the loss against, they played Hawthorn, got smashed by 66 points. And then Richmond coming off a 41-point loss to Port Adelaide. Well, honestly, they were actually kind of in it for 3 quarters of the game, pretty much. So pretty good performance from Richmond. And if you completely go off that, they're probably in this game. However, I think the pride in Collingwood come out a bit better than what the pride in Richmond will come out in. That was a very weird sentence. Holy Christ. Anyway, I think Collingwood should win this game by at least 4 goals. I think that's the baseline performance for Collingwood. I think they need to get this win if they want to even theoretically push for top 8 this year, but even just for potentially getting some good form into next year. I don't think it's good for them to just continue to perform badly. It would leave a sour taste in the mouths of a lot of... what am I saying? Anyway, Collingwood by 32 points. Let's move on. Okay, a good, interesting game to actually talk about now. Sydney versus the Western Bulldogs. Sydney coming off the 2-point loss to Brisbane Lions up at the Gabba. Honourable performance given some of the injuries that they had. Hayward, Rampy, and Papley all got injured in the game. Hayward was the one who was able to continue the game and continue to actually have an impact, which is impressive from him. But they're going to be without, obviously, Rampy and Papley till probably a lot of the season, I dare say. I did hear that Rampy's was only calf tightness, but it's not something you want to continue with. So maybe someone like Joel Hamling comes in and takes his spot. I think it's going to be a very interesting game given how good a form the Bulldogs are in. Rory Lobb's been a big positional change that has really helped them. I don't know if they get Liam Jones back, but if they do, they're really going to be able to push because I don't trust the Sydney Tools. I don't think any of them have really broken out aside from the Marty 9-goal game, but even after that, he still hasn't been very good. I think he's struggled to kick more than 2 goals in any of the games since, aside from maybe North Melbourne. But again, it's North Melbourne. And I think if Liam Jones does get back for the Bulldogs, they've got a genuine chance at this game. But I think the Sydney that we've seen so far this year should be good enough to be able to come get over the Bulldogs, especially at home, similar to how they bounced back against North Melbourne against St Kilda. Probably not to the same extent as they did against North Melbourne, but I think they'll have a very good performance against the Bulldogs. But this game is super important for the Bulldogs, and that's why I see it being a really close game. If they win this, they're absolutely favoured to make the 8, and I think there's going to be some really strong performance in this. You've got the midfield battle of Libba, Bont, Trelaw, Ed Richards, and then you've got English as the ruckman versus Heaney, Goulden, Warner. Mills should be back as well. and then the Ruckman of Grundy, and I think it'll be a very interesting battle. If the Bulldogs can potentially play a bit of a slower game where they get over 100 marks and not allow those shorter kicks, those 45-degree kicks that allow Goulden and Blakey to really get going, then maybe they can actually pinch it off them. But it's at their CG, and I really struggle to find a genuine chance of Sydney losing this game, given they've lost 3 of their last 4 games. So that's why I have them winning, but I still think it'll be close, which is why I've got them at an 11-point margin. And then the final game of the round, I actually think could make for the most entertaining. Maybe not the best game, maybe not the best football, but definitely the most entertaining. I think this should be a high scoring game. We've seen some really high scoring games between these two sides, not necessarily playing against each other, but in the last couple of weeks. And Adelaide, yes, they won't have Dawson, yes, they won't have Rankin, but it's at the Adelaide Oval, and it's a really difficult trip for a lot of teams to go and face them over there. St Kilda found that out a couple of weeks ago. A lot of other teams have struggled with that over the last 18 months as well. And so Hawthorn, this is going to be a really big challenge for them. Do they rise up to the occasion? I'm not too sure. I think it's honestly a very 50-50 game. We saw how good Ben Keys was for Adelaide. I think Rochelle can maybe build off the game-winning goal as well and maybe put a really good back half of the season in where he plays a bit more midfield time. Maybe they put Mitch Hinge and get him to do a Hayden Young. A lot of people have mentioned that in the media this week. But it's a really tough Hawthorn unit. They've got Day in really good form. Newcomb has been exceptional. Warple has now started to hit the scoreboard a little bit. Lloyd Meek has been fantastic, similar to what Kieran Briggs did in the back end of last year. I think there's a lot of comparisons you can make there. And maybe the Hawthorn of the GWS of last year. They've won, I believe, 10 out of 13 in the back half of this year after starting 0-5. Maybe it's very similar to what GWS did with the Meek and Briggs comparison. You've got the midfields, obviously, as well. And you don't have a true, genuine forward like what GWS did as well last year. I actually originally thought I was going to tip Adelaide to win this game, but thinking more about it, there's no Rankin, there's no Dawson, and I actually sort of really like Hawthorn now. Watching them play has been awesome. Their pressure, their just the personality that they come to play with is really exciting to watch, and that's why I actually have them winning now. I think they're up for the challenge, and maybe I'm proven wrong. I don't think it's too bad if I'm proven wrong, but it's going to be a very interesting game to close out, and I think a lot of people should watch this one. I think it should be one of the better games of the round, but I still have Hawthorn winning it now that I've thought about it a bit more by 14 points. If we look a bit about the ladder now, so Sydney still 2 games on top. You've got Carlton still at second, but then with Brisbane losing to Gold Coast, which I have, Fremantle and GWS get to move up. Brisbane's still at 5th, so still a home final. But then you've got Essendon with the win, luckily, against St Kilda to finish 6th. At the moment, Geelong and Port Adelaide, the other 2 in the 8. Hawthorn really rise up. Gold Coast as well, risen up. The Bulldogs, I think if they can get the win, it changes everything for their season, as that would move them, given their percentage, all the way up to 7th. And that changes a lot for them. But then you've got Collingwood, Melbourne, and then Adelaide St Kilda as a bit of a bunch before the bottom 3. If we look at my tips from last week, I think I got 5 out of 9, which isn't great. It's not bad. I think I tipped Adelaide to lose. I was so close to tipping Adelaide to win by actually 2 points, but I changed my tip to Essendon, which I'm a bit annoyed about. So that's a bit disappointing for me. Yeah, I did get 5. I tipped a couple other upsets. I wanted Gold Coast to win, didn't get that one. But yeah, I didn't do great, so 5 out of 9. But that's going to be the end of this video. If you do enjoyed it, please hit the like button. It'll really help push my video in the YouTube algorithm. I appreciate all your support you've already given me. Subscribe to my channel as well if you like this type of content. I am in the midway of working through my other deep dive. My plan is to get it out on the Friday of round 21, so next week. It's going to be a lot of work though, and it's my first week of uni, so I'm not sure I'm necessarily going to be able to get it out by then, but that's the hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments below about who you think might win some of these games, as well as how you went last week in your tips. But thanks for watching the video.